Hello, my name is Ryan Richards, and today we will be exploring the study from the first section of 40 studies that changed psychology, One Brain or Two. This study was performed by Michael Gazzaniga and Roger W. Sperry at the California Institute of Technology. Likely many of you are aware of the concept of hemispheric specialization, the idea that two hemispheres of the brain perform different functions. For instance, somewhat paradoxically, the right hemisphere of the brain controls the left side of the body and the left hemisphere the right. In addition, the left hemisphere of the brain is responsible for more logical behaviors, while the right hemisphere is responsible for more artistic behaviors. While this dichotomy is not entirely correct, as the results of the study will show, there is some truth in these specializations. The right hemisphere, for instance, handles spatial relationships required for artistic ability, while the left hemisphere handles language processing. This can be seen in cases where brain damage to the respective hemisphere hinders these abilities. The corpus callosum is a part of the brain that sits between the right and left hemispheres. It acts as a bridge, allowing communication between the two. When the corpus callosum is cut, the two hemispheres must then function independently, and in this state, they can be analyzed and evaluated individually. Performing such a radical brain surgery on research participants is obviously unethical, but the researchers were able to find a workaround. For a certain type of rare epilepsy, after all other options have failed, severing the corpus callosum can successfully reduce or remove seizures. Only 10 such operations had ever been performed at the time of the study, and 4 of the individuals were willing to participate. Of minor note is the fact that the procedure had relatively no impact on the participants' intelligence and personality. Differences in mental ability only became apparent once the study had begun. In order to isolate the function of each hemisphere, the researchers first had to isolate stimuli and responses to the left or right hemispheres. While sensory information, such as vision and hearing, is transmitted to both hemispheres, researchers were able to identify specific regions of the retina that fed into specific hemispheres. By having participants focus their gaze on a single point, images could be transmitted independently to both sides of the brain. Isolating response was easier. Since each hemisphere controls the opposite side of the body, the right hand could be used to obtain a response from the left brain and vice versa. The latter method was used in a part of the study where participants were required to identify objects by touch with either their left or right hands. The tests. As one of the first experiments, researchers flashed lights for both hemispheres of the brain. Intriguingly, while both hemispheres could register and identify the illuminated lights by means of pointing, participants were only able to express verbally that they had seen the lights when using the left hemisphere. In order to test tactile response, the researchers placed objects in the participants' hands while blocking the objects from view. The participants were then asked to identify the object. The results were similar to the visual test. While the researchers were able to confirm that both hemispheres could identify the objects, only the left hemisphere could verbally name and describe the object. In addition, when an image of an object was shown to the right hemisphere, participants could identify the object out of a set by touch, despite not being able to verbally describe the object or even declare that they had seen anything at all. While the right side of the brain in the participants may have been unable to express things verbally, it was not totally unable to understand language. When researchers showed participants the word heart split so that he was sent to the right hemisphere and art to the left, the participants all verbally declared that they had seen art, while their left hands, controlled by the right hemisphere, all declared that they had seen he. For some of the tests, individual hemispheres were asked to identify objects based on association. For example, one test involved participants picking out an ashtray from a set of 10 objects by touch when shown only a cigarette. Another test required the participants to select a plastic fruit from a bag, by touch only, based on tangential descriptions such as the fruit monkeys like for bananas. The right hemisphere was able to perform both of these tasks, even though participants were still not able to verbally identify the objects they had selected when placed out of view in the left hand. Participants were asked to reach behind a screen and arrange plastic blocks into words. While both hemispheres could perform the task, the right hemisphere, keeping with the pattern, could not identify the word that had just been spelled. A test in a later study had participants using blocks to answer questions using the right hemisphere. Interestingly, the response given would sometimes differ from the response given verbally. For instance, when one man was asked what job he would choose, he verbally responded draftsman, however his left hand spelled out automobile racer. In order to test emotional response between the two hemispheres, researchers showed provocative imagery to each hemisphere individually. Predictably, the left hemisphere was able to identify the image while the right hemisphere was not. However, a similar emotional response was shown both times. While the right brain lacked the ability to speak, so to speak, it proved more proficient in another area. When asked to draw 2D pictures representing 3D objects, the subjects were all able to draw better images with their left hands, despite all being right-handed. This associates proficiency with spatial relationships to the right hemisphere. Taking the results of all the tests together, it can be concluded that a good deal of processing can be done by either hemisphere. However, the left and right brain each have certain areas of specialization. Sperry and Gazzaniga, after many years of research, suggested the possibility that each hemisphere is in fact a separate brain, and that communication might be blocked even in individuals with the corpus callosum intact in certain circumstances. For instance, one might be unable to express the correct reason for feeling sad due to the reason being locked in the right side of the brain. The research carried out in this study by Sperry and Gazzaniga has rarely been disputed. The necessity of selecting patients suffering from epilepsy, however, might potentially have introduced a confounding variable, and the sample size might have meant the sample was non-representative. However, other research has supported the idea of hemispheric specialization, although in some people the roles of the right and left hemisphere are reversed. If I had the capacity to rewrite anything about this study, I would increase the sample size. Since split brain patients are extremely rare, however, this change is impracticable. Another change I would make is adding a control group of non-split brain individuals to see how the results compared. If such a thing was performed in the study, it was not mentioned.